We have a peculiar reverence for nice people in our society. But what if I told you that niceness is often not what it appears to be? You see, beneath the pleasant smiles and accommodating nods lies a psychological mechanism that serves purposes far removed from genuine kindness. Think about it. The person who cannot say no, who is perpetually agreeable, are they truly being kind to you? Or are they engaged in something more calculated? The need to be seen as nice often masks a deep fear, a controlling impulse, a spiritual avoidance. Let me tell you something. True compassion sometimes requires one to be anything but nice. Look around you at how we celebrate the nice among us. The colleague who never complains, the friend who agrees with everything you say, the family member who never causes conflict. We place these people on pedestals of virtue, praising their accommodating nature, their pleasant demeanor, their ability to make everyone comfortable. We teach our children to be nice above all else. We promote the agreeable employee. We seek out the non-confrontational partner. We value niceness as if it were the highest expression of human character. But here's the thing about niceness. It often accomplishes precisely the opposite of what genuine human connection requires. The nice person frequently creates more suffering, more disconnect, and more inauthenticity than the person we might label difficult or challenging. The nice person builds walls of pleasantness that no true human interaction can scale. They construct elaborate facades that prevent the messy, vital exchange of genuine human experience. We praise niceness. We reward niceness. We demand niceness. Yet in this collective worship of pleasant behavior, we have confused a social strategy for a moral virtue. In nature, you will notice that the domesticated animal appears nicer than the wild one. The pet dog wags its tail and performs tricks while the wolf remains true to its nature, neither performing nor accommodating. Which one is living in alignment with its essence? Which one has been conditioned to please others for survival? Have you considered that your own niceness might be a form of domestication rather than authenticity? How many people do you know who are unfailingly nice? What lies beneath their pleasant exterior? How often have you wished someone had simply been honest with you rather than nice? And perhaps most importantly, how often have you sacrificed your own truth on the altar of niceness? You see, we must distinguish between authentic compassion and what I call performative niceness. Authentic compassion springs from a genuine concern for the well-being of others, and sometimes, quite often really, it requires us to be anything but nice. It might demand that we speak uncomfortable truths, set firm boundaries, or allow others to experience the natural consequences of their actions. Performative niceness, by contrast, is concerned primarily with how we are perceived, with maintaining a particular image, with controlling the situation through pleasant behavior. I knew a man once who spent 20 years in a friendship where neither person ever expressed a negative emotion or disagreement. They were unfailingly nice to each other. When his friend suddenly disappeared from his life without explanation, this man was devastated not only by the loss, but by the realization that their entire relationship had been built on a foundation of pleasant falsehoods. Not once in 2 decades had either of them risked the discomfort of authentic exchange. They had been nice to each other, but they had never truly known one another. You see, beneath the surface of niceness often lurk motivations that have nothing to do with genuine care for others. In my observation of human behavior over many years, I have noticed certain patterns, certain categories of niceness that reveal its darker underpinnings. These categories help us understand not just others but ourselves, for we all engage in these behaviors to varying degrees. The first category springs from fear. This is niceness born of anxiety, of the terror of conflict or rejection. The person who cannot bear disapproval becomes pathologically accommodating, saying yes when they mean no, smiling when they feel anger, agreeing when they deeply disagree. This niceness is a survival strategy developed usually in childhood, when expressing authentic feelings proved dangerous or disappointing to those upon whom we depended. The second form of niceness is actually control in disguise. This is the person who uses accommodation as a form of subtle manipulation, creating obligations in others, establishing moral superiority, or avoiding responsibility. Their niceness serves as a method of getting what they want without appearing to want anything at all. This is perhaps the most insidious form of niceness because it operates beneath the level of conscious awareness. The third type involves those whose entire identity depends on being seen as nice. These individuals have so completely fused with their nice persona that any deviation from it triggers an existential crisis. Their niceness is neither about you, nor even about avoiding conflict. It is about maintaining their sense of self. Without their niceness, they quite literally do not know who they are. The fourth category involves what some spiritual teachers call bypassing. This is niceness used as a shield against the full spectrum of human experience, particularly the more difficult emotions like anger, jealousy, or disappointment. Spiritual platitudes and perpetual positivity become techniques for avoiding the darker aspects of our humanity rather than integrating them. What if I told you that all four of these forms of niceness exist within each of us? What if our most pleasant behaviors often mask our deepest fears, our desire for control, our attachment to identity, or our spiritual avoidance? Would you be willing to examine your own niceness with the same critical eye you might turn toward other aspects of human behavior? Here lies the paradox. Only by understanding the darkness that often motivates our niceness can we move toward genuine compassion. Only by recognizing the fear, control, identity attachment, and avoidance in our pleasant behaviors can we transform them into authentic care for ourselves and others. So I ask you to consider, what might lie beneath your own niceness? What truth have you left unspoken in the name of pleasantness? What part of yourself have you abandoned for the sake of being nice? And how might you begin the journey from performative niceness to authentic compassion? Now let me tell you something about these four faces of niceness. Each one serves a specific psychological purpose in our lives. They all represent strategies we have developed in response to our experiences, our conditioning, and our perceived needs. They are neither good nor bad in themselves. My intention is not to condemn niceness, but to bring awareness to its shadows. For only through awareness can we begin to transform our patterns from unconscious reactions to conscious choices. Only through understanding can we move from the shallows of pleasantness to the depths of genuine connection. The first type of niceness comes from fear. This is perhaps the most common source of our pleasant behaviors, and it begins quite early in our development. As children, many of us quickly learn that authentic expression of certain emotions leads to rejection, disappointment, or even punishment. The parent who cannot tolerate anger, the teacher who demands compliance, the social group that ostracizes the outspoken. Through these experiences, we learn to suppress our true feelings behind a mask of agreeableness. I once knew a woman who was unfailingly pleasant in all her interactions. She never complained, never disagreed, never expressed a negative emotion. Her friends and family praised her sweet nature, her perpetual positivity. But in private sessions, she revealed a childhood where her father would become violently angry at the slightest sign of displeasure from his children. She had learned that safety required her to be nice at all times, regardless of how she truly felt. Her niceness was not a virtue, but a survival mechanism, a trauma response that had become so ingrained she no longer recognized the fear driving it. Here lies the paradox of this fear-based niceness. The very strategy developed to protect us from suffering actually intensifies our inner pain. Like a turtle retreating into its shell, we may feel momentarily safe, but we become increasingly isolated within our protective barrier. The emotions we refuse to express do not simply disappear. They accumulate within us, creating a reservoir of unacknowledged feeling that poisons us from within. The person who cannot say no finds themselves drowning in resentment. The individual who never expresses anger discovers that it transforms into depression or anxiety. They smile when hurt. They smile when angry. They smile when empty. But beneath that smile, a storm is brewing. A storm that will eventually demand recognition, either through psychological symptoms or a complete breakdown of the nice persona. Have you noticed moments when your niceness springs from fear? When you agree despite your inner objections? When you smile through gritted teeth? What are you afraid might happen if you were to express your authentic response? You see, the second shadow of niceness is more calculated. While fear-based niceness operates largely unconsciously, this second type involves a subtle form of manipulation. The person who employs this strategy has learned that appearing accommodating creates a sense of moral debt in others. Their niceness becomes a form of social currency, collecting IOUs that can be redeemed when needed. I observed this dynamic in a colleague who was known for his exceptional generosity. He would offer help before it was requested, work late without complaint, bring coffee for everyone in the morning. But over time, I noticed how this generosity was selectively deployed toward those with influence or something he desired. I also witnessed how quickly his niceness turned to cold resentment when others failed to reciprocate or acknowledge his efforts. His giving was not freely offered, but was instead an unspoken contract, a spider weaving a web of obligation around those from whom he wanted something. This form of niceness functions as a power play in relationships where direct power is unavailable or socially unacceptable. Unable or unwilling to ask directly for what they want, these individuals use accommodation and pleasantness to create leverage. The moral superiority of being the nice one becomes a position from which they can judge others, control situations, and avoid vulnerability. Their giving has strings attached, though these strings remain invisible until pulled. Think about it. Have you ever used niceness to get your way? Have you performed favors with the unspoken expectation of return? Have you wielded your agreeableness as a shield against rejection, or as a subtle form of control? The irony of this controlling niceness is that those who practice it often feel deeply powerless. Their indirect strategy for meeting needs reflects their belief that direct requests would be denied, or that they are not entitled to have needs at all. Their manipulation through niceness represents not strength, but a profound sense of inadequacy. Now, the third face of niceness is perhaps the most common in our society. This is niceness that has become fused with personal identity. For these individuals, being seen as kind, helpful, or agreeable is not just something they do, but fundamentally who they are. Their entire sense of self is constructed around the image of being the nice one in their family, workplace, or social circle. What happens when this identity is threatened? What occurs when someone criticizes them or suggests they have been less than kind? How do they respond when their niceness fails to produce the desired result of approval and acceptance? The answer is usually a profound identity crisis, accompanied by intense emotion. I knew a teacher who had built his entire professional identity around being the nice, accommodating instructor that students loved. When a group of students complained about his lack of academic rigor, he experienced not just disappointment, but a complete psychological collapse. For weeks, he questioned everything about himself. If he was not the nice teacher, then who was he? Without this identity, he felt utterly lost, as if the ground beneath his feet had disappeared. This attachment to the nice identity creates a unique form of suffering. Like an actor who cannot leave his role, these individuals become trapped in a performance that prevents genuine evolution. They cannot explore the full range of human experience or expression because certain emotions and behaviors fall outside their rigid identity construction. They cannot grow beyond their niceness because growth would require them to become someone they do not recognize. But here's the thing about identity-based niceness. Beneath the rigid attachment to being nice often lies a deep emptiness, a fundamental uncertainty about one's intrinsic worth. The nice persona serves as a substitute for authentic self-knowledge. It provides a ready-made answer to the question, "Who am I?" preventing the more difficult but rewarding exploration of one's complex, multifaceted nature. The fourth shadow of niceness manifests as spiritual bypassing. This term describes the tendency to use spiritual ideas and practices to avoid dealing with uncomfortable emotions, unresolved wounds, and developmental needs. In the context of niceness, spiritual bypassing often appears as a misuse of concepts like forgiveness, acceptance, and positivity to avoid necessary conflict or authentic expression. We hear it in phrases like "everything happens for a reason," or "just focus on love and light" or "good vibes only." These spiritual soundbites get employed not to deepen our engagement with reality, but to escape from its complexities and challenges. The spiritual bypasser uses niceness as evidence of their evolution, their enlightenment, their transcendence of the human condition. But true spirituality embraces the full spectrum of human experience. Like weather patterns that include both sunshine and storms, authentic spiritual development incorporates all emotions, all experiences as part of the whole. The spiritual teaching that promotes only pleasantness, only light, only accommodation is not spirituality at all, but its counterfeit. Are your spiritual beliefs supporting your authentic expression or providing an excuse to avoid difficult emotions? Does your spirituality expand your capacity for honest engagement or restrict you to performative niceness? The false spirituality of perpetual pleasantness creates distance. The false spirituality of perpetual pleasantness denies our humanity. The false spirituality of perpetual pleasantness prevents the very connection it claims to foster. Think about it. We have explored the shadows that lurk behind the pleasant facade of niceness, the fear, the control, the identity attachment, the spiritual bypassing. But now we must turn our attention to the consequences, to the casualties that result from our collective worship of pleasantness above authenticity. For every falseness we perpetuate, every truth we suppress, every boundary we abandon creates ripples of suffering that extend far beyond our immediate experience. The damage caused by niceness may be subtle, may be socially sanctioned, may even be praised, but it is damage nonetheless. And it touches everything and everyone in its path. The first and perhaps most immediate casualty of niceness is the self. The nice person commits a peculiar form of violence against their own being. They systematically ignore their own needs, override their own boundaries, and deny their own emotions in service of maintaining a pleasant exterior. They become strangers to themselves, disconnected from the internal signals that would guide them toward wholeness and fulfillment. They live as if their own experience matters less than the comfort of others, as if their own truth is less valid than external approval. I knew a woman who spent decades as the accommodating daughter, wife, and friend. She said yes to every request, anticipated needs before they were expressed, and never burdened others with her own desires or difficulties. Her niceness was celebrated by everyone who knew her. Then, in her 50s, her body rebelled against what her mind had accepted. She developed severe autoimmune conditions, her physical form literally attacking itself as her psyche had been doing for years. Her physicians were puzzled by the severity of her symptoms, but she understood their origin. Her body was expressing the rage, the boundary setting, the self-protection that her conscious mind had refused to allow. This is not an isolated case. The self-betrayal inherent in pathological niceness creates a state of internal civil war. The authentic self with its needs and feelings rises up against the constraints of the nice persona, and the battlefield is often the physical body or the emotional stability of the individual. The nice person develops mysterious ailments. The nice person suffers anxiety and depression. The nice person experiences episodes of uncontrollable rage that seem to come from nowhere, but in fact come from everywhere they have said yes when they meant no. They abandon themselves. They betray themselves. They lose themselves. And the longer this self-abandonment continues, the higher the price they ultimately pay. Have you noticed the physical tension that accompanies your own niceness at times? Have you felt the exhaustion that follows a social interaction where you were not authentic? Have you experienced the resentment that builds when you repeatedly override your own needs and boundaries for the sake of being seen as accommodating? But here's the thing about the casualties of niceness. The damage extends far beyond the individual to the very relationships the nice person is attempting to preserve through their pleasantness. Genuine connection between human beings requires authenticity, the willingness to be seen as we truly are, and to see others in their truth as well. Niceness creates a barrier to this connection, a layer of falseness that prevents hearts from truly meeting. I observed two colleagues who worked together daily for 15 years. Their interactions were unfailingly cordial, pleasant, nice. They never disagreed openly, never expressed frustration with one another, never engaged in conflict of any kind. When one retired, they attempted to maintain a friendship outside the workplace, but discovered they had no foundation for connection. 15 years of pleasant exchanges had produced no genuine knowing of one another. Their niceness had prevented precisely the authentic engagement that might have created a relationship capable of surviving beyond the context that had required their collaboration. Here lies the paradox of niceness in relationships. The conflict avoidance that nice people believe preserves their connections actually prevents those connections from developing depth and resilience. Like a plant that receives only sunshine but no rain, relationships deprived of honest engagement, of the full spectrum of human emotion and expression, may appear to thrive for a time, but ultimately lack the strength to endure life's inevitable challenges. How many of your own relationships exist on the surface level of pleasantness? How often do you engage in genuine, vulnerable exchange with others? How many people in your life truly know you? Not just your nice persona, but the complex, sometimes difficult, always authentic human being beneath that persona. The irony is that nice people often experience profound loneliness despite being surrounded by others who approve of them. Their pleasant mask receives abundant social validation, while their authentic self remains unseen, unknown, and unconnected. They are loved for who they are not, and this is no love at all. Now, I'm not saying that niceness is always inappropriate or destructive. There are contexts where social pleasantness serves a valuable function. But when niceness becomes the dominant value of a relationship, a community, or a society, truth becomes its casualty. Essential realities go unacknowledged. Necessary conversations never occur. Problems fester beneath the surface of collective pleasantness until they erupt in ways that can no longer be ignored. I witnessed a spiritual community disintegrate after a decade of growth because its members prioritized harmony over honesty. Financial irregularities, ethical breaches, and abuses of power went unchallenged because no one wanted to disrupt the nice atmosphere that had become the group's primary value. By the time the truth could no longer be suppressed, the damage was too severe for recovery. The community that might have been preserved by timely truth-telling was destroyed by prolonged niceness. Truth and compassion are inseparable in any healthy human system. To withhold truth out of a misguided desire to be nice is like a physician refusing to diagnose a serious illness because the conversation would be uncomfortable. The momentary discomfort of honest communication prevents the extended suffering of unaddressed reality. Do you find yourself concealing truths to maintain pleasantness? Have you observed problems growing unchecked because no one is willing to acknowledge them? What price have you or your communities paid for prioritizing comfortable falsehoods over uncomfortable truths? The final and perhaps most tragic casualty of our obsession with niceness is genuine compassion itself. True compassion arises from a clear seeing of reality as it is and a deep commitment to the authentic well-being of ourselves and others. It is not concerned with appearances or social approval, but with what truly serves life and growth. Niceness, by contrast, is primarily concerned with the maintenance of pleasant appearances regardless of underlying realities. Compassion may require us to allow others to experience the natural consequences of their actions rather than shielding them with our niceness. Compassion may demand that we speak truths that disrupt comfort, but create possibility for genuine transformation. Compassion may call us to engage in conflicts that clear the air, rather than maintaining a false peace that slowly suffocates all involved. What if I told you that the most compassionate act available to you in many situations might be precisely the act that seems least nice? What if setting a clear boundary, expressing a difficult truth, or allowing someone to face the results of their choices is not cruelty, but the highest form of care? What if compassion requires not the suppression of fire, but its controlled burning, like the forest fires that clear away dead wood and allow for new growth? This understanding requires courage. It asks us to risk disapproval, to value truth above comfort, to trust in the resilience of ourselves and others rather than assuming fragility. It invites us to discover a way of being with one another that honors the fullness of our humanity rather than its carefully curated, pleasant aspects. We have journeyed through the shadows of niceness, exploring its fear-based origins, its use as control, its fusion with identity, and its role in spiritual bypassing. We have examined the casualties left in its wake: the abandoned self, the superficial relationships, the suppressed truths, and the distortion of genuine compassion. This exploration might seem harsh, even cynical, a dismantling of what our society holds dear. You see, the purpose of understanding the darkness is not to dwell there, but to move through it towards something more authentic, more whole, more genuinely life-giving. By recognizing the shadows behind our niceness, we create the possibility of transforming it into something far more valuable: authentic compassion. True kindness cannot exist without the integration of shadow. It requires us to acknowledge our darker motivations, not to condemn them, but to bring them into the light of awareness where they can be transformed. Authentic compassion differs from niceness in fundamental ways. Where niceness concerns itself with appearances, with how we are perceived, compassion focuses on what truly serves the well-being of ourselves and others. Niceness avoids discomfort at all costs. Compassion is willing to tolerate, even create temporary discomfort in service of genuine growth and healing. Niceness maintains pleasant illusions. Compassion sees and responds to reality as it is. I once witnessed a teacher interrupt a student who was sharing ideas that sounded profound but contained dangerous logical fallacies. The interruption was direct, even blunt, and certainly not what most would consider nice. The student initially appeared hurt and embarrassed, yet this teacher had the presence to stay with the student through this discomfort, to explain precisely where the thinking had gone astray, and to affirm the genuine insights that were present alongside the errors. In the days that followed, the student sought out this teacher repeatedly, not for validation, but for the clear seeing that he recognized as genuine care. The teacher had offered something far more valuable than niceness, the gift of truthful presence that acknowledged the student's capacity for growth. Compassion is like water that both nourishes and erodes. It gives life to what serves life, and wears away what does not. It flows around obstacles rather than pretending they don't exist. It can be gentle as morning dew or powerful as a rushing river, adapting its form to what the situation requires rather than maintaining a rigid commitment to pleasantness. Compassion sees you fully. Compassion responds to reality. Compassion serves your becoming, not your comfort. Have you experienced the difference between someone being nice to you and someone being truly present with you? Can you recall a time when someone offered you the gift of truth rather than pleasantness? How did it affect your life, your growth, your understanding of genuine care? But here's the thing about moving from niceness to compassion. It requires the courage to establish and maintain clear boundaries. Many of us fear that boundaries will damage our relationships, that saying no will cause others to withdraw their love or approval. Yet the opposite is true. Clear boundaries create the conditions for genuine connection rather than the superficial pleasantness that characterizes so many of our interactions. A woman I knew spent decades as the perpetually available friend, mother, and colleague. She answered every call, responded to every request, and never declined an invitation or plea for help. She became increasingly exhausted and resentful, but continued her pattern of niceness out of fear that setting boundaries would mean losing relationships. When a health crisis forced her to begin saying no, she discovered something surprising. Most people in her life respected her boundaries and actually grew closer to her as they encountered her authentic self rather than her accommodating persona. A few individuals became angry and disappeared from her life. But as she reflected on these losses, she recognized that these relationships had been based entirely on what she could provide rather than on mutual care and respect. Her boundaries had not destroyed meaningful connections, but had revealed which connections held meaning. This illustrates the paradox of boundaries. By creating limitations, they actually generate freedom. Like riverbanks that channel water into a powerful flow rather than allowing it to dissipate into a stagnant puddle, boundaries direct our energy in ways that serve life rather than depleting it. They provide definition and structure to our relationships, allowing for deeper connection precisely because they clarify where one person ends and another begins. Do you find it difficult to establish boundaries? Do you fear the consequences of saying no? What might become possible in your life and relationships if you were willing to define and maintain clear edges to yourself, your time, your energy, and your availability? The nice person, in their avoidance of conflict and rejection, often says yes to what deserves a no. But every false yes is a betrayal, not just of the self, but of the relationship. It creates a foundation of inauthenticity upon which nothing of value can be built. The journey beyond niceness also requires us to integrate both shadow and light, rather than identifying exclusively with our more pleasant aspects. We are complex beings containing multitudes, the capacity for both selfishness and generosity, for both pettiness and nobility, for both fear and courage. Wholeness comes not from amputating the parts of ourselves that seem dark or unacceptable, but from bringing them into relationship with the whole. When we acknowledge our darker motivations, they begin to transform. The fear that drives our niceness, once recognized, begins to loosen its hold. The controlling impulses behind our accommodation, once brought into awareness, can evolve into more direct and honest expressions of our needs and desires. The identity attachment to being seen as nice, once understood, can expand to include the full spectrum of our humanity. This integration is like acknowledging both day and night cycles as essential to the rhythm of life. Just as the earth requires both light and darkness to sustain life, we too need to honor both our light and shadow aspects to become fully human. To insist on perpetual daylight would create a scorched and barren landscape. To insist on only expressing our pleasant, positive qualities creates a similarly depleted internal terrain. What if I told you that your shadow contains wisdom? What if those aspects of yourself that seem darkest, most unacceptable, most at odds with your nice persona, actually hold keys to your authenticity, your power, your capacity for genuine compassion? What if the path to wholeness leads not around, but through the very qualities you have tried most diligently to disown or suppress? I have often observed that people who are comfortable with their full range of emotions and responses, who make no claim to perpetual niceness, frequently offer the most authentic presence and connection. They have less to defend, less to prove, less concern with how they are perceived. This frees their energy for genuine engagement with reality, as it is rather than as they wish it to appear. The practice of moving beyond niceness into authentic presence begins with small acts of truth-telling. Notice when you are about to agree to something that does not align with your values or desires. Pause. Take a breath. Consider what an authentic response would be. Then speak that truth, simply and directly, without either aggression or apology. Notice when you are tempting to smooth over a difficult reality with pleasantness. Again, pause. What needs to be acknowledged here? What would serve life in this moment? What would genuine compassion offer? I knew a man who described himself as a recovering nice guy. For decades, he had built his identity around being agreeable, accommodating, and pleasant in all circumstances. The process of reclaiming his authenticity began with tiny moments of truth-telling that gradually expanded into a complete transformation of how he engaged with himself and others. He spoke of the initial terror of potential rejection or disapproval, and the surprise of discovering that his honest presence attracted deeper and more meaningful connections than his niceness ever had. The authentic self exists beneath the layers of conditioning that have taught us to prioritize pleasantness over truth, accommodation over boundaries, and approval over integrity. Like a stream that naturally finds its way around obstacles, our authenticity will emerge if we simply stop diverting it into the channels of socially sanctioned niceness. When was the last time you felt fully aligned in your speech and action? What made that moment possible? What might support you in experiencing that alignment more frequently in your daily life? Think about it. We began by examining the peculiar reverence our society holds for nice people. We have journeyed through the shadows behind the pleasant facade, the casualties created by prioritizing niceness over authenticity. And now we return to our beginning with a transformed understanding. The truly kind person is not the one who is unfailingly pleasant, who never causes discomfort, who sacrifices truth for the sake of temporary harmony. The truly kind person is the one who has the courage to be real, to establish clear boundaries, to speak necessary truths, and to remain present through the messy, complicated, sometimes difficult process of genuine human connection. The most radical act of compassion may be to abandon your niceness in favor of your authenticity. The most generous gift you can offer another human being is not your pleasantness, but your presence. The most transformative path is not the one that bypasses shadow, but the one that integrates it into a more complete and honest expression of your humanity.